How's it guys, this is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'll be taking you guys through the ultimate guide to the upcoming Game Week 9. So Game Week 9, I won't lie to you, seems like a pretty kind of straightforward game week. If you guys wildcarded last week, Game Week 8, probably rolling a transfer. If you're like myself, looking at a Game Week 10 wildcard, it's 1 week punt time. And if you're doing neither of those, I guess it's just good vibes overall. But don't worry, there's a lot of talking points to go over in this video. I'll be going over the usual ones, the stats review. It's been a while since we made an update to the stats. And I'll be going over at the end of this video, the Campsy debate, which does prove to be quite nice. So yes, if you guys want to go differential, are tired of captaining Erling Haaland, some great options this week. And I'll be going over all of them. Now as mentioned, like myself, if you guys are looking at 1 week punts, that's going to be a big talking point in this ultimate guide. I'll be going over the fixtures and the players and giving you guys 3 of my favorites. So that's something that you guys are interested in. Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So the first talking point, as we usually do, is going to be all about the stats. I'll be going over the attacking stats first, then go over the defensive ones, covering the best teams and the worst. So let's bring up the 6 best teams in terms of XG non-penalty per 90 minutes, and a big surprise at the top there is going to be actually Everton. So yes, Everton with 2.26 XG per game. Now yes, they haven't scored that amount of goals in their opening games, which just shows they are underperforming by a large margin. So if you guys do own one of those Liverpool defenders, if it's a Trent, a Gomez, Van Dijk, I don't exactly know if the clean sheet's going to be there, as their attacking stats are looking pretty decent. Now does this mean that you guys should be jumping on a Calvert-Lewin? Maybe, but I'd probably only do it if the fixtures look immense. Next up is me Spurs, a very popular team at the current moment. We've got Maddison, got Son, Pedro Porro, Udogie. All these assets have been pretty strong, but the Spurs fixtures have also been pretty decent. But nevertheless, a better attacking side than defensive side this Premier League season. So if you guys are looking to sell a Son or Maddison, just beware as they are putting up good numbers. We're then going to have Brighton at 2.05, even though the results haven't been that strong over the prior game weeks. They are always a very decent attacking squad. Now this is kind of the perfect scenario at the moment. The stats are looking pretty decent, the fixtures have been tougher, but they have some nice fixtures coming up from Game Week 10 onwards. So I'll definitely be going over these Brighton assets fairly shortly. Then the last 3 teams are pretty expected. It's Liverpool, Newcastle, and Man City, all strong starts this season. I think these 3 sides you definitely expect to be but it's always nice to see that they are kind of backing up their numbers. So these 6 teams, if you guys want to look for some more attacking squads, definitely will be targeting them. Everton, yes, it's a little bit of a question mark, but the rest of the 5 are always going to be decent. But now let's go over the 6 worst teams in terms of XG per 90. Now these are teams to target for your defenders. For example, if your player is facing Sheffield United, it's an almost guaranteed clean sheet. And that's why I like to cover these squads. So as you guys can see, Sheffield United, Burnley, Nottingham Forest, your top 3. We then have Luton, Crystal Palace, and Bournemouth. And these are all expectations as these are kind of weaker inverted comma Premier League squads. Now the big one for me is going to be Crystal Palace because this was kind of the stats with Eze. Now that he's injured, those stats are going to decrease. So I do almost think that a Newcastle clean sheet is locked in this game week. Other than that though, newly promoted sides from previous seasons. Unfortunately, all of these sides you got to target from a defensive point of view. Now the big thing to note is these squads, we have a bunch of teams on a Game Week 10 wildcard that are facing these squads in consecutive game weeks, so the clean sheets could be absolutely massive. But yes, once again, the top 6 and the bottom 6 XG non-penalty per 90 minutes, I just prefer the non-penalty variant of XG as it's more sustainable. But now let's go over the defensive numbers, let's go over the top 6 squads. I'll be going over expected clean sheets per 90 minutes. You guys can also go for expected goals. I just prefer expected clean sheets as it normalizes over the game weeks. So the top team in terms of defense is going to be Man City, no surprises there. The only tough part about them is predicting which defenders are going to be playing. But if you guys can predict, you're going to be getting some clean sheets. So then expectation, Arsenal coming up next. If you guys saw my kind of wildcard discussion, Arsenal assets will definitely be on the agenda, defensively and offensively. So let's see what Game Week 9 does hold for us against Chelsea, as if they do keep a clean sheet, almost think a double up in defense could be locked in. We then have Newcastle, also pretty decent. If you guys own Kieran Trippier like myself, you get that defensive threat and the defensive threat. So we're looking pretty good. We then have Chelsea, Crystal Palace and Brentford, and what I also want to note here is that you guys can see Palace and Brentford are tied on 0.32. There was another squad that was also tied here, and that's Nottingham Forest. So if you guys are looking to start Turner this week against Luton, that's a perfectly fine solution to go for between the sticks, as the defensive numbers this season have been pretty good. But I see that Chelsea are going to be unfortunately Reece James picking up another injury in training, but if a Chilwell or a James was fit and playing, just imagine the FPL points that they would offer. Crystal Palace also being there, which just shows you they're not really attacking that well, but defending pretty well. And that's why personally, on a wildcard next week, I'm looking at a Crystal Palace defender. But if you guys do own someone like a Flecken from Brentford, also looking pretty good, and he's come back from his injury or his illness. But I guess the more exciting portion of this talking point will be the bottom 6 teams, so you guys will target these teams offensively. If you have strikers, midfielders playing against them, the chance of a haul could be there. So for example, Sheffield United, if my United assets this week, Bruno and Rashford, don't return, I don't exactly know what I'm going to do with myself because they're playing the worst defense in the Prem at the moment, with 0.11 expected clean sheets per game. They're going to be followed up by Bournemouth, Wolves, West Ham, Burnley and Brighton. As you guys would have seen, Brighton attacking well, but defending terribly. And the one big concern for myself is West Ham, as Aston Villa and all you wildcarders in Game Week 8 have probably doubled up on that attack. So yes, a Diaby, a Watkins could be absolute gems this game week. I just hope my players can actually outperform them. But just a reminder here, if you guys do have attackers facing these sides, definitely start them or even captain them, as the chance of a haul should be pretty good. But that's going to be the conclusion of our stats review. As you guys know, I like to go over the attacking and defensive numbers from a team point of view, but you guys can go over to Fantasy Football Fix, as they have all the Opta stats that you guys want. Now before we get too deep into the actual talking points, I want to go over some injury updates. As you guys will know, any international break, there's going to be injuries. Fortunately, this week hasn't actually been that bad. So the first player I want to talk about is going to be Heung-min Son. If you guys did see the video of him kind of limping off at halftime, you'd have to really be concerned, as it seems like it was just a knock. So on screen right now, I'm going to bring up some quotes from FPL Sonaldo. You guys can go follow him over on Twitter, but he watched the post-match interview of Heung-min Son and translated what he basically said. So what he said was basically in the first half, he bumped his thigh and that's why it's not really an issue and that's why he was limping. And he also did play a full 90 minutes in that second friendly. So he basically goes on to say that the 90 minutes was good for himself and he's going to be returning to Spurs fairly shortly and hopes that he can maintain his good condition. So I just want to put this out there for you guys. If you were looking to maybe not captain Heung-min Son or looking to sell Heung-min Son, please don't. It seems like you'll be fine for the upcoming game week, but obviously watch out for the press conference. Now another talking point on Heung-min Son was, should you guys be selling Son or Maddison for Saka? But that's a debate I'm going to leave for next week. I want to absorb one more game week of information, as you guys will only be making that transfer before game week 10. So conclusion here is that Heung-min Son was limping because of kind of a little bit of a knock, but let's wait to see in the press conference if he's going to be fit for game week 9. Now the bigger injury news unfortunately was going to be for Andy Robertson from Liverpool. He dislocated his shoulder, but they are waiting kind of a scan to see if he will require surgery or not. So this came from Paul Joyce over on Twitter, the kind of main correspondent for Liverpool news. And the bigger FPL news is that Tsimikas at his cheaper price point might be an option. So yes, if Andy Robertson will be missing a few game weeks, obviously Tsimikas might not be the kind of natural selection, but I do believe he will. And that's why at his cheaper price point, with only fixtures coming for Liverpool, he could be a mainstay in a wildcard. But obviously just wait and see what kind of Jurgen Klopp says. If the scan results come back and he does require surgery, he could be out for a number of weeks. Now the last talking point I want to go over in terms of the injuries isn't really injury concerning, but it's to do with the South Americans. So as you guys will know, they played the early hours of today, and therefore they'll be returning to training a little bit later than the other European players. Now do I think this is a concern? I don't exactly know. They should be returning Thursday or Friday. They could be getting 1 day or 2 days of training in them, and that should be perfectly fine at this stage of the season. Just remember, these players have just left their Premier League squads, they've played the international break. I don't exactly think their fitness levels will be that impacted by playing some international games. These players also probably traveling on private jets, so they'll be getting enough sleep on those planes. So if I had to do a prediction, I think most of the South American players should be perfectly fine for Game Week 9. But as always, wait for the press conferences coming up tomorrow, coming up on Friday, as I'm pretty sure those players should be returning to training fairly shortly. But now let's go on to the biggest talking point of my game week. This is going to be a kind of personal talking point. I am looking to wildcard in game week 10, so if you guys are looking to do the same, who are the best 1 week punts to look at? So let's first look at the fixtures. Let's go over the best fixtures for the upcoming game week 9. This is from Fix yet again. On the left hand side will be the attacking ratings, and the right hand side will be the defensive ones. So let's go over the top 6 best attacking fixtures, and as you guys can see, it's going to be number 1 Brentford versus Burnley at home, and as an Mbumo owner, I'm really holding thumbs. So if you guys are looking to make a 1 week punt, maybe Mbumo could be a great shout to go for. Otherwise, you could look at Nottingham Forest against Luton. So we'll talk about a little bit later on to an option I'm potentially looking at in the midfield department, but Nottingham Forest definitely going under the radar. Within my favorite team at the moment, seems like I'm a fan of Manchester United. I promise you I'm not. I'm a fan of Liverpool. At least both teams have a good game week this week. So United have Sheffield United away and Liverpool at Everton at home. Both great games on paper, and as I mentioned, if Bruno and Rashford don't return this game week, I don't exactly know what I'm going to do. Also have a double up with Alvarez and Haaland for Man City against Brighton. Good fixture on paper, I can agree with them, especially with the high press that Man City do offer. Then the final team, the fixture I'm worried about, is the Aston Villa versus West Ham at home. Their stats are looking that great from a defensive point of view, so Ollie Watkins and Dayvy could potentially do well here. Then let's look at the defensive ratings, relatively the same. We have Forest again against Luton, Brentford versus Burnley, but now we have Bournemouth versus Wolves at home. I don't really think any of us do own these Bournemouth assets though, but Newcastle assets against Crystal Palace, that's going to be nice to get points from. So we spoke about this fact, Crystal Palace unfortunately without Eze going to be even worse, and the Newcastle defense is the third best in the Prem. So fingers crossed Trippier has a massive game week, as he's definitely differential on you wildcarders. Then the final two teams yet again, United and Liverpool, both relatively easy games there, but as mentioned, Everton's attack is actually the best in the Prem at the moment. So if you guys are looking for fixtures, I definitely would target that Brentford one. Looks like it's going to be a great game on paper. Otherwise, United and Liverpool offer some nice alternatives of more expensive assets. So now let's go over my 3 favorite options for 1 week punts. Unfortunately guys, I'm not going to be going over too many defenders here. I think if you guys are looking to take a 1 week punt, the attackers are more viable as they generally have the highest ceiling. So my number 1 option and the player that I'm currently favoring is Diogo Jota from Liverpool. He plays Everton at home and has an expected FPL points this season of 7.12 per 90 minutes. Now please just be aware that Jota hasn't played the most minutes. I think he's played about 200 minutes this Premier League season, so those stats could be a little bit inflated. But my current thinking in Liverpool at the current moment is Jota was suspended for the previous game. He just played for Portugal, did relatively okay, and with Luis Diaz and Darwin Núñez travelling so far, I believe Jota is guaranteed to start. So yes, that's what I was talking about with the South Americans. I do expect them to play game week 9, might be off the bench, might be starting, but the nice thing about Liverpool is we will get early team news as they are the first kickoff. So this Jota position could be a Gakpo if he returns miraculously, it could be a Luis Diaz if he's going to play, or you can look at Darwin Núñez if you want an attacking forward. But the Liverpool assets in my opinion are the best assets to look at because as I mentioned, they're playing the first kickoff and therefore we might get some early team news. But my second favorite option, I spoke about Nottingham Forest. Gibbs White on the projected points is doing decently. Unfortunately, his expected FPL points this season haven't been as high. But he is quite cheap, he is facing Luton, arguably the better fixture, so Gibbs White is going under the radar in my opinion. But if I had to choose between Jota and Gibbs White, I probably would go for the Liverpool asset. I just want more Liverpool in my team. Then the final asset to look at is going to be Højlund from United. Yes, I know, a terrible squad at the current moment, but at least he's performing decently, even though his expected FPL points is only 3.63 per game. But Sheffield United away, it's a great game on paper. I do expect United to score and do pretty well here, so why not go for the United attacker? Now yes, I know, a ton of other options to potentially look at. Everyone's team is super situational, so for example, you guys don't own a Heung-min Son, a Maddison, they could be great assets, but I've generally gone for more differential picks. But now's your time to get your say in the comments down below. Who's your favorite differential going to game week 9? If you guys had to take a 1 week punt, even if you wildcarded last week, if you had to take a 1 week punt, who would you guys potentially be looking at? Now the last talking point I want to go over is going to be all about captaincy, and as I mentioned, Erling Haaland is going to be the permanent captain every single game week, so let's just talk about him quickly. So I think the big news about Erling Haaland over the past couple game weeks is he hasn't been performing at the optimal level, but I'd argue that Man City have neither. It's a very kind of close relationship there and very understandable. If Man City don't do well, Erling Haaland probably won't do well. But with Rodri returning to the squad, I do expect them to improve. Not only that, is they are facing Brighton at home. You guys would have seen against Liverpool weren't the best defense. As Man City's high press and Bournemouth playing out the back, I do expect a couple of goals to be leaked. Now if you guys are a fan of projected points, also please note that Fix has him as the highest projected point scorer at 7.7 for game week 9. So I personally will probably be captaining Erling Haaland unless we do get news in the press conference from Pep, and I believe he's the best option. But saying he's the best option, I do believe there's some very close assets, and the first one's going to be Mo Salah against Everton. So yes, if you guys do want to back the early kickoff, but just remember that Mo Salah is the best returner in the early kickoff, so it depends what kind of agenda you guys want to push. Now he's projected to score 7.2 points, which is very close to Haaland's 7.7, so if you guys want to go for a differential, Salah might be the man to go for. Even more differential might be Heung-min Son against Fulham at home, 5.1 expected FPL points, so that's quite a big drop off from the other two. But I do kind of believe that Heung-min Son is a fine asset. If you guys do own both Salah and Son, I would definitely go for Salah rather, as there is this injury concern with Son at the moment. But fortunately, if you guys don't own Erling Haaland, there's great assets to look at. Game week 9 is the game week of the home fixtures, and for most of the premium squads, they have pretty decent ones. So in the comments down below, let me know who your captain is for the upcoming game week 9. If it's Erling Haaland, why are you going for him? And if you're not, who's your differential punt? Now this is going to kind of conclude our ultimate guide, but as always, if there's any other talking points you guys want me to go over, comment them down below. I generally reply to every single comment. Also, let me know if the audio sounds better than yesterday's video. I think yesterday's video sounded a little bit mumbled, so fingers crossed I've improved it. But this is basically going to wrap the video, guys. Hope you guys did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Team selection coming up tomorrow, so make sure those notifications are turned on, as Game Week 9 looks like an absolute banger. But I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.